Welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce Taru, who's going to talk us about strategic partnership boards, but I'm not going to say any more. Taru, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and the topic of the session today and how that's going to work.
Brilliant. Thanks, Noel. It's really nice to be here, and I really enjoy these sessions. So it's quite interesting to be on the other side and presenting something. And I'm actually not really presenting information as much as just asking a whole load of questions, most of which have been questions that have really worried me, I suppose, through a lot of my local government career, both here in the UK and in South Africa. And that's, so I'm going to share my screen quickly, and then the aim here is just give you a little bit of background on the topic, and then hopefully launch into a bit of a discussion about strategic partnership boards and what they look like, and some of the difficulties I've had with managing or being part of these spaces. So I guess what we're talking about. So I'm talking here really about those statutory or formal boards that are created to action or enable lead partnership working and strategic action. So here you might know them as the health and wellbeing boards. Maybe it's your local strategic partnership board. It could be a community safety partnership board. So the variety of different actions where the sort of boards that are either set out in statute or formalized through local government constitutions. And at the same time, also talking about a lot of what they're trying to do, which I understand is strategic collaboration. And I really like this definition, or this is how I think of strategic collaboration, which is the intentional collective approach to addressing a public problem. And there's, I suppose, a lot of these spaces are seen to do kind of multiple things at the same time. So some of them, they kind of enable in networking and informal cooperation, and as well as formal cooperation. And sometimes they even enable sort of pooled budgeting, integrated or integration or consolidation or transfers of functions. So this is the issue I'm kind of really interested in, and have spent quite a lot of time kind of wondering about how they should be working, or how this is, I guess, my experience of how they work at times. So my question, I guess, to you, rather than to is to ask about your experience of them. And really, I think, I don't know if anyone's ever done a Chatterfall before, but what I want everyone to do is to answer this question, which is, but you answer it in the chat, but don't press enter yet, because we'll see all the feedback coming in at the same time, which is, why do we actually care about strategic collaboration in local areas? So why is it important? Why is it in statute? Why do we formalize it? What is it that makes it important for us going forward? So, sorry, why is strategic collaboration and partnership in local areas with local partners important, and why do we care? So I'm just going to give you a minute to type it into the chat, and then we can, well, I'll say enter, and we can all enter at the same time. Oh, actually, hang on, I don't want to go there yet. Okay, so we should be pressing, if you could just press enter now. Okay, so awesome. Okay, gosh, it's coming in nice and fast. We have bringing ideas together, mobilizing the key issues, better data and information, working with, helping us solve local problems, making sure that we can kind of work together. Yeah, so lots about working together, solving problems together, information sharing, using resources better. I think that's often the one which gets said quite a lot. Building alliances, addressing complex issues, yep. Aligning priorities, exploring innovation. Right. Oh, and a whole systems approach. Okay, so I guess we're all well versed in why strategic collaborations or partnerships are important. And I'm just worried, are you seeing my screen share? Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Because it's gone a bit funny on my side, so I just wanted to check it's fine for you. And I did a bit of preemptive work, and I reckoned you'd all probably come up with some of the things that I feel as somebody working in local government is what I get told a lot about partnership working boards. Cost savings, yes, innovation, improving services, reducing duplication, thinking differently, all the stuff that kind of came up in the chat. I guess where I've got stuck is why does it not necessarily always feel like that, or what's going wrong in these formal spaces that sometimes it doesn't actually achieve the things that they were set out to do. So again, I've got another quick chatter for, and if you could be really honest about your experience about the work and effectiveness of partnership boards, and maybe it's totally different to mine, and I'd really welcome that, and hopefully you can get rid of some of my jadedness around these kind of formalized statutory boards. So if you just type in, I'll give you a few minutes to type in the chat about what your experience is in describing the work and effectiveness of the strategic partnerships you've worked with. Okay, so do you want to press enter? Let's see what's come through. Okay, yeah, so changes in membership and local structures can be very slow to progress. A lot of talking about doing the right thing, but doesn't really lead to action. Oh, somebody's saying it has improved services. Finding it easier to do bilateral work with one or two partners rather than to deliver through boards, definitely. Those are things that I've also seen. Agendas can be too busy and overwhelming. Not enough focus, feel like talking shops with no action and no grounds. Okay, so I feel like some of us might have had similar experiences of these partnership boards. And I guess what really upsets me, or why I feel so strongly about this subject, is there's a lot of people that are paid quite a lot of money to be in these boards, and often it's really high level or senior officers, executive directors from various different organizations. But how come we're not seeing what we are hoping to see, or what we've described in the last sort of chatter for, about them doing that kind of cost saving, effective service improvement? What's going wrong? To council led as well. So yeah, definitely some of these things. So I've got two examples that I wanted to share with you. Although it does sound like most of you have experienced some of these issues with you. So these are two stories I have about boards. They're two different boards. So it's, yeah, and one is statutory. So the first I want to talk about was the Health and Wellbeing Board. And I think the Health and Wellbeing Board is actually in quite a difficult situation at the moment. We've seen the ICP, which is Integrated Care Systems and Partnerships across the country, kind of taking on a lot of the work in terms of promoting collaboration at a local level. These boards were established under the Healthcare Act, you probably all know, in 2012. But I think in many different contexts, there's been quite a lot of debate about actually what's the role for these boards when we have integrated care systems, and how do they interact? I think the white paper that was recently published is quite vague about what that looks like. They kind of say, oh, it's really important that health and wellbeing boards do some kind of place-based integration, but that's also the job of the integrated care partnerships at a local level. So we've just been recently, I've had a whole set of interviews actually, in which prompted some of this presentation about actually what do the membership of these boards think about it. And some of the stuff that you've mentioned already came out. There was a sense of purposelessness, people saying, I don't really understand the role of the board and what should be doing, a sense that it was duplicating work and effort, unclear roles. It wasn't even sure, members weren't exactly even sure what they were supposed to be doing in these meetings, or how they were supposed to feedback or to the people that they represented.
Taru,
yes.
the slide doesn't seem to be moving.
Oh, let me try. Sorry, I thought there was something was going wrong on that. Let me just try and share again. Can you see that now?
Yeah, that's better. That's health and wellbeing boards.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just telling you a little bit about this board, so hopefully that's come up for you. Yeah. So I had one member say to me that they slightly dread seeing this health and wellbeing board in their calendar. Again, like people said in the chat, it's not felt that it was active or strategic, and the membership was felt to be really, really large. Okay, another board I've worked with, our local strategic partnership. You might remember they were kind of created in the early 2000s. They were linked to funding and focusing on neighbourhood renewal. It would aim to bring public, private and business communities together. They were supposed to be non-statutory, non-executive, and I thought this was quite interesting. They were meant to make strategic decisions, but be close enough to neighbourhoods to enable action and aligned with local authority boundaries. The board that I'd worked with had morphed and changed in various ways. It was retained even though it was no longer needed, or needed in order, it wasn't linked to funding, but still was struggling to define what was actually happening. So some of the issues that emerged with this board is its purpose felt very broad and too visionary, and linked so much to strategy that it wasn't even clear what it was supposed to be doing. The membership was really interesting. I had one of the members saying to me, it's the same people, but just a different meeting, the same kind of strategic leadership, just kind of migrating from different strategic meeting to different strategic meeting. And the other thing is that we had this sort of similar voluntary sector organizations or community participants kind of elected to each different sort of strategic board, which made their efforts kind of unsustainable. I know somebody else mentioned in the chat, but we had a change of leadership, which also really affected the board. I would probably also say some of our processes meant that people came to the table, but it didn't necessarily address the silos that existed between them. And it also felt like we kept starting again every single time we had a new chair or a new year. We would kind of start over again with the same data, setting up the same goals, and taking us back to where we started with kind of these countless hours of so-called collaboration. And then the other thing that I would probably stick my neck out and say is that this idea of collaborating almost meant that people didn't necessarily always feel that they could stick their neck out. And this was kind of reinforced that this was all happening in the public space. So I guess in summary, some of my concerns with these boards more generally, and based on these two case studies, but on some of the other boards I've been part of, is it's often felt like it's always the wrong way around. We start with governance and then we just retrofit purpose. So we kind of go, oh, we have to have this board, we better find something for them to do. Often the work is too broad, it's sometimes paralyzing, it's not what people are passionate about, and it kind of initiates a sort of institutional inertia. The other thing I'd say about a lot of them is because they're often held in public and are formalized with a kind of very strict agenda and a chairperson and a way of speaking, that this kind of bureaucratic theatre plays out. And there is very little space to ask difficult questions, to stick your neck out, to really collaborate and to kind of bang heads together, because that kind of thing you don't really want to do that in the public space. The other issue I found is it's often top down. So we have senior officers and members feeding information down, but it doesn't actually always replicate the actual relationships and networks that happen in organizations or within organizations to make work happen. The other issue, which I'm sure many of you kind of experience, is the number and breadth of partners. So each having their own culture, drivers, definitions, geographies in some cases. So if you think about the Health and Wellbeing Board, the kind of difference between a CCG and and the local authority means that people are often speaking very different languages. In fact, somebody said to me, I just don't even know what people are saying half the time because there's so many different acronyms. And then there's also times where people are just not empowered because organizations like the DWP, for instance, don't necessarily act locally. And then again, we've talked about like power leadership and how changes in leadership affects ownership and accountability. And then on the other side, there's also not necessarily enough invested in supporting kind of relationship building activity and giving it enough time to take off. So often things kind of start and then it just stops because it's just taking too much time. So there's a deep sense of impatience that then actually, as things start sort of getting a little bit traction, that everything changes around. So I guess because I spent so much time thinking about this, I've also kind of asked what do clever people say about this, and what do they say about collaboration and how it should work. So I'm just going to rush through some of these slides because I'm actually more interested in what you think about it, because I haven't found the answers in this, and some of it feels quite broad and stuff that I agree with, but it's not necessarily always very practical. So there was some work done by Emily Miles and William Trott on sort of the US, Canada, and India, and they looked at successful collaborative working, and they identify 4 different sort of kind of main tenets of it, and that's a common purpose, a strong insistence on a whole systems approach, which I actually think came up in one of the chat, shared power, and maintaining the user services perspective. Then New Local did a piece of work just coming out of COVID on how to sustain some of the mutual aid kind of partnerships and collaborations that had happened. And they, again, talk about focusing on building relationships before partnerships, shared missions, keeping communities front and center, and learning together. So we've got that. And then the collective impact approach, which I think is quite big in the States, the Strive's collective impact approach, they've got sort of 5 different main principles. Again, replicate a lot of what we said, sort of a common agenda, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, backbone support organizations, and shared management systems. So those, they say, are the main tenets to good collaborative working and strategic partnerships. And then the King's Fund, I suppose, also dealing more recently with some of the issues around the creation of integrated care partnerships at a local level, also talk about some of the main tenets that would help us work well as in a partnership. Again, focus on purpose, relationships, building on what exists locally, joined up resource management, strengthening the roles of providers of place, and effective place-based leadership. So that's what other people are saying. And I guess my big question is really this, is on one hand, it feels like, more my experience has been that we have a formal statutory board with a dictated vision or goal, either set out in statute or in terms of reference that we inherit over years. It forces organizations together, it demands reporting, openness, transparency, which is really good things. But it is also an invited space that's owned by certain organizations where others are invited to contribute. And then on the other hand, we have a sort of set of criteria for making partnerships work. And these are things like a shared vision, building relationships, using a systems approach, putting the user at the center, allowing for learning, sharing power. But how do we bring these 2 together? And so that was really my main challenge for this session. And yeah, so that's actually where I want us to go with this. So many of you probably heard about liberating structures, and I'm really kind of passionate about using them to help us think through various different issues. And I feel that this is, for me, quite a wicked question. So the kind of main question that I'm struggling with is how is it that we are statutory, formal, and bureaucratic? Because that's often how strategic partnerships work for me, or what I've seen working in local government, as well as collaborative, whole systems, and effective simultaneously. And I'd like us to have a go at us using the experience from everybody in this meeting to design that partnership, using a model called the purpose to practice model, which is that kind of round circle. So there's various different headings. So we'll break down into smaller groups. The idea is you'll get a Jamboard, which we'll share in each of the chats. We'll use 2 or 3 minutes to discuss which partnership you want to kind of focus on. Are you going to focus on a kind of ideal partnership, or maybe there's a health and wellbeing board, or a local strategic partnership, or community safety partnership, or something that you kind of want to focus on? If everyone could kind of spend 5-ish minutes then using the post-its, or the I think they call them sticky notes, on the left-hand side of the Jamboard, to kind of populate this with some ideas about what that kind of that partnership that is both statutory, formal, bureaucratic, as well as collaborative, whole systems and effective would look like. Really kind of going from purpose through to principles, participants, structure and practices. And then after you've had those kind of 5-ish minutes, to spend a few minutes talking about each of those in your groups, and then hopefully come back to share if somebody can be nominated from each group to share 2 or 3 insights from their group with the larger group when we come back. So that would be it. So now I'm going to have to leave it to you, Noel, to figure out how to break down the groups.
I'm going to automatically allocate people, so bear with me as I do that, and you will see yourselves disappearing into a breakout group. And I'll also put the links to the Jamboards as well. So it should be starting to open. This can take time. Right, I think well, we've got everyone back from our room. I think we've got everyone back. So should we do some quick feedback? Tori, do your group want to go first?
Okay, well, yeah, I can. Amanda, do you want to feedback? Because we're actually talking about your local strategic partnership.
I don't know. I saw you taking a few notes though, so I might just hand. But I'm really sorry. I might hand back on this one.
Okay. So I think the things that were really interesting for me, or just to reflect on and hear about how we were talking about Merton's local strategic partnership as an example board. Two things that really stood out for me is how we kind of link our purpose, or the purpose of the board, to the purpose for, or what are the priorities for residents locally, and how do we actually make that link very explicit in the work that we're doing. So beyond just kind of broader partnership working or making the place a better area, what exactly is important. And then we had an interesting discussion about when the purpose is too broad, and whether there's kind of purposes around focusing on a very specific topic, like I think Amanda mentioned county lines, and how that then initiates a different kind of discussion because it is really focused. And then the other thing that really stood out for me that I was going to focus on is how we had a discussion about different organizations bringing different strengths to the table, so strengths-based approach, but at the same time having a space that felt where people felt okay to ask uncomfortable questions and so to probe rather than celebrate, because there's a tendency of, oh, we're all bringing our strengths and everything we know, but actually that doesn't mean that you can't probe and question and make things more explicit, and then perhaps deal with those uncomfortable feelings in an effort to kind of collaborate rather than just celebrate all the good things that are going on. So those are two of the things I wanted to bring out. Amanda, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you sort of captured it. I think one of the things sort of mentioned in the group I found interesting was around sort of the crowdsourcing of kind of issues for us to discuss. It's how we're involving residents and other stakeholders in actually what the priorities that we might discuss as a board. So I thought that was just an interesting aspect of what we discussed. Thanks.
Great. Who would like to feedback from our group? Well, I'm happy to then, but do jump in with contributions, and I'm sure I'll have missed things out. So we talked about, you know, kind of like how do we kind of demonstrate the kind of a shared sense of purpose as a partnership? Kind of how do we develop those behaviours about like how we work as a partnership, and then kind of discussion that like we went in kind of deeper was actually you know, kind of being open about kind of the different like ideologies and kind of motivations that like shape us, and ideologies not like from a party political perspective, but kind of like a much deeper perspective about kind of the things we value, the type of knowledge and insight that we, you know, that we value, for example, and you know how you know kind of who shapes the debate, who drives the way that kind of like a partnership or kind of collaboration takes place, because that can be either inclusive or kind of exclusive. And there was a kind of a quote that maybe doesn't sum it up, but I kind of thought definitely captured the ethos, which is some people that were involved in a project Janet was involved in, where they said, we know we've succeeded when a creative piece of work is as valued as a spreadsheet. So I don't know if other people want to kind of jump in and like build or kind of add anything I've missed. Do jump in. Cool.
I suppose just to chip in, just to chip in the other dimension, which I think, Tara, goes very much to your sort of, you know, on the one hand we've got these hard things that say we have to do these things, and on the other hand we know that relationships is what works, is that most of our sort of formal partnerships are described as it's organisations or agencies that take part, but it's actually individuals that come to the meetings, and often it's different individuals, and the complexity of thinking about the quality and the behaviour of the partnership, both as an organisational level and as an individual level. And if you take time to separate those things out all the time, you might end up with a more sophisticated understanding of what's going on in your partnership than crashing them together all the time, because that's sometimes where the, you know, we blur them and we think they're the same, whereas actually they're just not.
Definitely. Before we kind of close up, Tori, did you want to share any kind of like final reflections on the subject?
Oh, well, firstly, just to say thank you. I think this is a topic that has really worried me, I suppose, in the sense we've got so much resource going into kind of maintaining and creating and running these partnerships. And I've often felt quite disillusioned by it because it feels like, where's the good stuff that's supposed to happen from them happening? And I've kind of been on a mission to try and find out where that actually happens. That there are like pockets of it, but I think it was a really interesting exercise to go through and just understand how other people are doing things, but also where, like, what matters when you're talking about partnerships. And I agree, it isn't. We talk about what Janet was saying about, we talk about individual organizations being part of partnerships, but it's individuals, and actually that was kind of a key takeaway for me as well. But and really helpful, and it'd be great to, I'm very keen to go and have a look at the German boards as well and see what I can pick up, because I think there's so much you can learn around this, and everybody kind of keeps on talking about it, but how exactly do we make these work in the best way possible? So I don't have to sit in another meeting where half of the people are answering their emails and kind of looking rather sort of vaguely at the screen, because I think that just doesn't feel like what it's supposed to be about. So I'm really grateful, and thanks, Noel, for the opportunity to do this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much, everyone, for your very open contributions, and kind of thanks, Dari, for kind of setting the context and kind of like opening us up to like different models, and for facilitating kind of us into thinking about strategic partnerships. Next week, we're looking at how we develop workshops in kind of more creative and collaborative ways, so kind of slightly more meta, but actually builds on this subject in a way which is actually, how do we move on beyond like traditional workshops, which obviously come from specific ways of doing things. So I'll share share Tari's slides and kind of the recording, and yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.